What is going on, investors? Colin from the CES show in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, I just sat down with the Blink charging CEO. We talked about three things that were interesting. Talked about the incoming Trump administration, how that might change things from a regulatory perspective for the EV and the charging business. We also talked about autonomous vehicles, what that could mean and is an opportunity for a charging company like Blink. Also, right at the end, there was a little bit of a nugget on consolidation in the industry, which is music to my ears as an investor. We could have some shakeup from an M&A perspective. We talked all about that. I hope you enjoyed today's interview. All right, investors, I'm here at CES 2025 with Michael Battaglia, CEO, incoming CEO.
Yep.
At Blink Charging. How's it going?
It's going great. The show's fantastic.
Cool. Tell us, you're at the Consumer Electronics Show. What does Blink Charging do at the Consumer Electronics Show?
Oh, well, I'll tell you what Blink Charging does in general, and then we can talk about the show specifically.
Perfect.
So Blink Charging is a full service EV infrastructure company. And what that means is that we offer a full suite of electric vehicle charging hardware products and software services that layer on top. We're totally vertically integrated. So what that means is we manufacture our own level 2 charging equipment. We have a full suite of DC fast charging equipment, and we have developed and deployed our own software network that runs all of these charging stations, both in North America and Europe. We have multiple offices globally. We both sell product and we own and operate chargers in, again, both of those markets.
And I have an electric vehicle, so I've experienced your product, experienced Tesla's products, some of your competitors as well. Are you serving just the consumer electric vehicle charging market, or is there a commercial component to this as well, where there's fleets and businesses that are operating electric vehicles? Are you serving that market too?
Yeah, so first of all, Blink, we are a B2B company. Okay. So all of our business really comes from commercial charging stations. So then you dissect those and say, well, what are public charging stations and what are fleet, call it private charging stations. So first of all, the company's single largest customer on the fleet side and overall is the United States Postal Service. So we sell a lot of charging stations into fleets in general, both here, again, in North America and in Europe. But the core business is around publicly accessible charging stations, again, globally. So for instance, and it's really industry agnostic. So we sell charging stations into hotels, into workplace, into shopping centers, into malls, into what am I leaving out? Multifamily apartment buildings. Thank you. Yeah,
stuff like that.
Thank you. So yeah, it really runs the gamut.
Do you have any is it all commercial, like you said, at a shopping mall? Can I buy a Blink charger for my house?
Oh yes, absolutely. You can buy a Blink charger for your house. And what we focus on is a more value-added segment of the residential space, which we call take-home fleet. So we do a lot of this in Europe, and we're now introducing it into the US. So think of a company that provides their employee with an electric vehicle as a company car. Sure. They fuel that vehicle at home through a charging station. Now, how do they bill the company for those electrons? Basically, the way we do it is we will install a Blink home charging station at their house, and we will handle all of the billing and reimbursement services with the company through our network. So we concentrate more on that than, let's say, selling a home charging station on Amazon.com.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. And so I was reading through your latest conference call, and it sounded like you had a business model where it's more going towards the owner-operated, where you're controlling a lot of the chargers, which not only gives you, it sounds like maybe higher margins, but also recurring revenue, because that charger continues to generate revenue as customers and businesses continue to charge. Can you talk about that shift in business model, or that enhancement of the business model?
And it also, by the way, affects maintenance and uptime, and to the positive. So I'll talk about that in a moment. But when you look at Blink, our long-term strategy is to have the majority of our revenue coming from recurring revenues and services. So that is the owner operator model. So what does that mean? It means that we partner with property owners, and let's take a hotel. Hotel's a great example.
Yeah.
So what a hotel does well is run a hotel. What Blink does well is run EV charging infrastructure. So we go to the hotel and we say, hey, how about we install charging stations on site? We will own them, operate them, maintain them, and then we'll share in the revenue that's generated from those stations with you. So, so that is the high margin recurring revenue. Those are on long-term multi-year contracts. Currently, 25% of the company's revenue comes from that type of model. We are pushing more and more in order to increase the mix of services and owner operator and software subscription fees beyond that 25%. So over the next few years, you're going to see that go up more and more.
Sure. And you want to talk about the maintenance side of that? Is there a maintenance component of that where you're servicing those and generating revenue? Is that how it works?
Yeah. So one of the really ideal aspects of the owner operator model, both for Blink and for the customer, is that we have an inherent motivation to keep that charging station up and running. So if that charging station's broken, if it's down, we are earning zero on our investment. So when we see that situation happen, we are immediately deploying a technician to the site. If it's in the case of a level 2 charging station, most of the time we're just swapping it for a new one. Or if it's a DC fast charger, obviously we're making sure that that technician goes out there with the right set of parts and is getting that station up and running quickly.
Sure. So you mentioned the United States Postal Service, and I think we're just a couple of weeks away. We're having obviously a shift in administration. It sounded like, though, some of your competitors and some of the industry relies a lot on government subsidies or government to pay for some of the charging stations to be built. There's been a lot of law and legislation that has been passed that has allowed those subsidies to come out in the marketplace. Sound like you're less reliant on those. Let's just talk broadly about, though, the regulatory shift that's likely coming. Obviously, President Trump's coming in, but his right-hand man is Elon Musk, who, like, look, you do compete with them probably a little bit on the charger side, but like, I think you probably view them as an asset because they're putting a lot of
For
vehicles
sure.
into the market that, like, I will go to a Blink charging station and charge my vehicle. And so maybe let's talk about the regulatory environment for the next, I would assume, 4 years. Where does that put Blink charging? Where are you thinking about that?
Yeah. So first I want to address the beginning part of your comments. So while we welcome subsidies in the market, and of course we like them, we would never forego them nor ignore them. They help, but it's not the foundation of who Blink is and who Blink will be on an ongoing basis. So we are building a sustainable B2B company. We view those incentives as helping offset our investment costs when they're available. But again, not something that we necessarily rely on, because we go through a rigorous set of analytics that determine whether or not we invest our capital in a specific site. Okay, so again, when they're available, great. When they're not, it's okay. Secondly, look, we are a politically neutral company. Administrations come and they go. Policy comes and goes. It changes, and that's okay, and that you should expect that. We don't see, by the way, any negativity on the horizon in terms of that. I think the priorities will shift a bit, but here's what's really interesting. When we talk about the Trump administration, one of their goals is energy independence. It's one of their top goals. There is the EV business in general, whether it be electric vehicles or electric vehicle charging infrastructure, only helps and augments energy independence in the United States. We do not import electricity in the US. It is all generated here and distributed here, and so it will actually help the country's objective of going towards energy independence. So that's one. The other thing that we think could happen is a little bit more of an emphasis on level 2 community charging and coming out of the government. And that is actually Blink's sweet spot. So we're looking at this. Obviously, we're watching it closely, but the early indications that we're hearing is that could actually be a net benefit for Blink.
Interesting. Also, kind of shifting gears just a little bit, but also related to the regulatory environment, is I'm walking around CES and there's a lot of autonomous vehicles.
Hmm.
And I'm seeing, obviously I'm out in California, so I see the Waymos driving all over
Hmm.
San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I'm thinking to myself, this is probably a huge opportunity for a charging company because these electric vehicles are going to be put in use more and more and more, and they're going to be charged maybe multiple times
Hmm.
a day. And
Yep.
then right now, it's a relatively small fleet of cars in a select number of cities. I
Hmm.
think if we're sitting here a year from now, these electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, are going to be in every major city. And then if we come back 2 or 3 years from now, they're going to be pretty much everywhere. And so, what is this opportunity of autonomous vehicles, particularly autonomous electric vehicles, present to Blink, and how do you think you might capitalize on that?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So I think, when we look at the autonomous vehicle companies that are deploying EVs, the solution that they would like to be able to come to is no human involvement in the recharging of that vehicle. So think of a Waymo pulling into a charging depot, pulling into a parking spot,
Sure.
and it can charge. Now, how do you do that? Well, you do it wirelessly. So when we are looking at different technologies and the evolution of technologies in this space, that is one of the things that we're looking at because of that exact use case that you just brought up. Now, again, it's early. It's very early. So, but then we get into, well, what are the right type of wireless charging um, solutions that are going to be out there, and there's different standards that are still being worked out. So I would say that we have one eye pointed towards that, and as that market evolves, we'll be there.
Nice. So it's CES 2025. We're in
Mhm.
Las Vegas. A year from now, I know you're just kind of you were president of Blink, is that correct?
I will be in 3 weeks.
And so
Yes.
you're taking full control of the whole thing. A year from now, where do you want Blink Charging to be?
So I want Blink Charging, number one, to be a great place to work. So that is perhaps, one of the most important things. We have 600 employees globally, from India to Europe to the United States, that are pouring their heart and soul into this thing. So, number one, I want those employees to be enthusiastic about where they're working. Secondly, obviously, I want to see the company grow. But the question is how? How? And a year from now, I would want to be sitting down here with you and saying, hey, the company, the services revenue side of the business was 25% and now it's 30 or it's 35%. So I'd like to see that mix shift. The second thing I'd like to see is Blink's reputation for customer service and uptime and reliability be among the top in the industry. And it's critical that driver experience, that customer experience in terms of the hosts that have our charging stations in the ground, they need to have a confidence level in Blink that is second to none in terms of, hey, this is a company that understands what they're doing, that knows what they're doing, that's responsive, and that will meet the needs of the market. So those are just a couple of things. There are some really exciting things on the horizon for the industry. We're very optimistic. We think there's going to be consolidation in the industry. We think there's going to be some opportunities for mergers and acquisitions. So we'll see if we can pull some of that stuff off. But there's really some exciting developments.
So you think the industry is going to consolidate because obviously you have Tesla, which is kind of, I would say, kind of stands on its own. They're a vertically integrated
Hmm.
car maker,
Yep.
basically. They're an energy company. I would say they're kind of in its own category.
Yes.
But there are other charging companies very similar to yours trying to put boxes in the ground to charge EVs. You think that industry is going to consolidate around a single company, or is a larger company going to come and consolidate the smaller one? I mean, like obviously we're speculating here,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
what do you mentioned consolidation. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the way we think about it at Blink and the management team thinks about it at Blink is that over time there'll be fewer players. So no, I don't think it'll be one player, right? I think there will be some leaders in the market that command some pretty large market share.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about that though is that there are some very small EV charging technology and infrastructure companies out there right now that are doing some very interesting, innovative things. And so I think companies like Blink have the opportunity to fold those organizations into ours so that 1 + 1 = 3. So over time, we'll see how this goes, right? But over time, I do see consolidation in the industry, but there will continue to be competition, and that'll be good. That'll be healthy for the industry.
What's something one of these smaller companies out there are doing from an innovation standpoint, like you said? Like what is it? What are they doing that's kind of interesting to Blink?
So they're doing things that we are either in process of developing,
I see.
have developed, and they might augment those capabilities. But let me give you some examples. So number one could be capabilities within the energy management system space. So, when you think of electricity management, there's a lot being written about that now, right? Grid resilience and stress on the grid and things like that. The great news is that we can solve these problems through software implementations. So think of a hospital as a great example. All right, so we have a hospital. Hospitals use a lot of power.
Yeah.
And let's say we add a whole bunch of EV charging stations to a hospital. What you want to be able to do is efficiently manage the electricity load, not just among the charging stations themselves, but throughout the entire property. And so those are the type of things that we're looking at. We're also looking at things like, how do you efficiently and effectively deploy microgrids and battery energy storage coupled with, larger level 2 charging banks, DC fast charging, et cetera. So those are just a few of the things, but the sophistication of the industry is going to accelerate over the next year to 2 years.
Interesting. So this is almost, you're charging primarily electric vehicles now, but the market could expand into other opportunities like entire facilities, hospitals, schools, universities, those types of
Yeah,
things.
so I mean, look, Blink's vision is to enable the electrification of transportation.
Hmm.
That's Blink's vision. And that's not just passenger vehicles. Those are commercial vehicles.
Sure.
Those are, well, shoot, it's going to be aviation at some point, right? I mean, there's so many things that are happening, that are moving towards this. And the other thing I think to point out is that this is not a linear rocket ship path towards the electrification of transportation. This has its ups and downs. It has its ebbs and flows. But the important thing I think for especially your listeners to remember is that the end game is not changing, which is a significant portion of transportation globally is going to move electric. And that's why a company like Blink is well positioned over the long term.
Oh, that's well said. Uh, Mike, thanks for joining me.
Thanks,
I
Colin.
think everybody will enjoy this. And thanks again.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
have a
you.
good show.